I'm Nicole. Welcome back to my channel. I am just about to embark on my last knitwear repair job for this year, and I thought I would take you along on it because it's going to be a very interesting one. I have got here what is probably a hand knitted cardigan which somebody sent in to me. She described it as a Norwegian cardigan, so I can only assume that it was hand knitted, possibly even some sort of family heirloom. But as you can see, we've got lots of damage around the whole garment. We've got several holes like this. Here's a really big one here, and then many smaller ones where some moths have been having a bit of a nibble on all of this yummy wool. So we are going to be giving this cardigan a little spa day, and we're going to be restoring her back to her former glory. The main complication with this is the amount of colour work that we're going to have to negotiate here. Stitch-wise, it's a pretty straightforward repair. We're going to be just using a standard stockinette stitch. We're going to be doing that through our duplicate stitching technique, but we are going to have to incorporate lots of colour work here. So it'll be an interesting one for you to see, so that you can see how you might do a repair like this, where you've got lots of different types of colors. You see this a lot in this kind of Nordic type of knitting, but also in virile knitting. This is a relatively advanced knitwear repair. This is the kind of repair that I would not have necessarily had the confidence to do if I didn't understand some basic principles of knitting before I embarked on my first job doing this. But it's not rocket science. I'm going to talk you through exactly what I'm doing on not every single hole, but on the bigger hole. However, this is not a step-by-step tutorial. If you'd like to learn in detail the actual principles I'm using and the actual techniques I'm using to do this repair, then you'll want to check out the step-by-step tutorials that I have available on my Buy Me a Coffee shop, where I teach you all of the techniques that you'll see me using in this repair. I will link it in the description. If you download those tutorials, what I'm doing here will make a lot more sense. So, are you ready? Let's get into it. Now, first things first, we need to source some yarn in order to do the repair. We do have many holes to get through, so we are going to need quite a lot. Normally, if it's a solid color jumper or even a striped jumper, we would look to the garment to see whether we can harvest any matching yarn from the garment to do the repair. However, on this cardigan, it is so color worked that it was first of all going to be very unlikely that we were going to find enough yarn in all the colors that we needed to do the repair. So I knew from the start that I would need to be sourcing some external yarns to do this. The added complication here is that there is no side seam here on the body. The way it was constructed, there's really not a lot of yarn that we can harvest from the seams. And even so, probably we would only find it in one or two colors. So I'm going to be using some external yarns to do this repair. I'm going to show you the yarns I'm going to be using. And in the description, I've also linked where you can source them or what you can use to search to find your local suppliers. For this thick type of wool knitting, I tend to use these Anchor tapestry wools for the repairs. What I like about it is the weight is quite similar to these types of garments, but also they come in so many different colors. I just so happen to have these particular shades available in my studio, although when I've done repairs in the past, I have had to go out and source other colors as well. I chose the closest available colors that I have in my studio. These are close enough. The red is just a tiny shade darker than the red on the cardigan. The white is a tiny bit brighter. The black obviously is pretty spot on. This chartreuse color is a little bit brighter than the lime or chartreuse here. And the green is pretty spot on. It's maybe just a tiny touch darker than the green on the cardigan. But this particular client was happy with these, so we're going to be using these yarns to do our repair. When it comes to this type of color worked knitting, what you'll see on the reverse is a series of floats. These yarns that you see being carried across in short lengths, these are called floats. The way the knitting is constructed is that when we have to knit a particular color, so here we've got a pattern in this bottom row here of 3 red stitches, 3 white stitches, 1 red, 1 white, and so on. So we will work the colors. For example, we will work these red stitches, and then when we're working the white stitches, the yarn that we've just finished on the red will float across, and we will pick it up here on this next stitch. Similarly with this white, we'll finish this white stitch here, and then we will carry a small float across to this stitch here. And that is why you get all of these lines of floats across the back. So we're going to be replicating that technique as we do these repairs. So let's start off with this hole. This is quite a nice juicy one for me to demonstrate with you. Because we're working with quite a nice chunky knit here, I'm going to be using my bent nose tapestry needle to do this repair. Let's start by just tidying up all of the broken yarns and putting them towards the back. We've got a couple of red floats here, which we may or may not use to pick up as we go along. We'll just leave those for now, but any other broken yarns, we can just take care of those, put them to the back. We've got a little drop stitch here that we can pick up with our latch hook. Now, because we've got a little band here and I can't get to the back of this to weave that end in, what I like to do in that case, let's go in here. Just keep a tiny little tail there. I'll snip that off at the end. We're just going to wind up the legs of this column here. I'm going to go under the V shape of the stitch above. And then I'm going to come back down the other legs of that column. Because the yarn is quite long at the moment, we're going to get a few little tangles and things. So when you're passing it through, just bear that in mind. So we have now anchored the tail of that yarn into this column of stitches. So now we can start our duplicate stitch going across to this area that we need to rebuild. Now I'm actually going to go over this second row because although we still have an intact set of live loops, this one that I've just pulled through with the latch hook to me is just looking a little bit thinner than the other ones, and I'm just worried that that will end up becoming a weak link in the repair. So I think let's just reinforce that. So I'm just going to duplicate stitch along this second row up on the white. Now that we're getting to the hole, I'm going to place my tailor's ham just under the work, and I'm actually just going to stick my pins into the tailor's ham. I have got my tailoring pins that I'm using to do the repair. I'm just going to stick a couple of pins into the live loops here. I'm going to keep duplicate stitching across. By starting on this row, you can see I've now reinforced that loop here, which I thought was just looking a little bit weak. And let's just keep going for another couple of stitches across here. I like to just anchor the repaired area with a couple of duplicate stitches on either side so that it doesn't end up weakening and compromising the repair. Because the column right next to the hole is not always that stable, so I like to go 2 or 3 stitches in just to be on the safe side. I'm just going to go up and across to the next row up. And now let's come back this way. We've just got 1 row of white stitches to do here. I'm going to pop a pin into this one because as we get to this red row, it's just looking a little bit scraggly and compromised there. I'm just trying to get the stitches to look about the right size and the right tension. Let's just pop a pin to keep this column here steady. And again, let's just go a couple of stitches onto this side. Now the next row up is where we're going to start our colour work. So I'm going to bring this to the next row up in the white column. And I'm just going to do my 1 white duplicate stitch here on this row. I'm going to skip under this red stitch and I'm just going to float and go across to the next column of white stitches. Now, before we get into the colour work, let's work out what the repeat pattern is. We've got an alternating red and white section here. Then we've got 3 white stitches followed by 3 red stitches, 1 white, 3 red, 3 white, and then it repeats. So there we need to have 3 white stitches followed by 3 red stitches across this section here. So we've done 1, 2. We now need to do a 3rd stitch here in the white. And then we can carry this float across the back until we get to the next white stitch, which will be this one over here. And let's just leave that there for now. Let's build up the red section now. Again, because we can't get to the reverse of this, I am going to start anchoring my red stitches. Let's do that here. The same as we did with the white. I'm just going to go under the legs of these red stitches here. under the two legs of the white stitch above, and then come back down. The other side of that column. So now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start my duplicate stitch on the red row. So let's do a duplicate red stitch here. That will just anchor the repair on this side. Now we've got to carry this red float across the back, and then we will pick up this first stitch in this block of 3 red stitches. So that's 1. And then we could probably just duplicate stitch over this one here. I'm just going to pop a pin in there just to keep that in place. We are ready to go to the next row. So for the red, I am going to take it up to the next row, but across to the nearest red stitch on the row above. Again, giving myself some good anchoring on either side of the hole. So while we got the needle on red, let's just carry on stitching in the red on the row above. So let's duplicate stitch here. We're going to go under this white stitch, pick up the next red stitch that we need to. So again, we're going to go 3 red stitches here. Can even bring that one through if you want it to be a bit fancy. Again, let's just bring that one through, why not? Going to be reinforcing it anyway, but might as well just pick it up so it's not just floating around in space back there. So that's 3 red. So now we can carry the red float across to the next red stitch in this row, which is in this column here. And let's bring that up and across to the row above into that red stitch there. And we will just hold that there while we work the white colour across that row. Now we need to go up a row with this white yarn. The closest one would be all the way over here. I don't think we need to anchor that quite so much over there, especially because we've anchored the red. So I'm just going to go directly 1 stitch up. And now let's start going across that row with the white stitches. So we've got 1 here. We're going to carry the floats across to the next white stitch, which is the first in this set of 3 over here. Let's move that pin there. And again, let's take it across to this column, but we're going to go 1 row up. Seeing as we're already on white, let's go across this way in white. We've got 3 rows to do here in the white before we switch up the colours again. So and then again, we're going to carry that float across and pick up the next white stitch in this row, which is over here. And I'm going to bring this up and into the white stitch in the next row up, ready to start that one. But before we get to that next row, let's go ahead and build up the red across this row here. Going to take that float across to the next red stitch in this row, which is where this pin is here. And then we're going to go 3 red stitches. Let's go into the next column, but the row above. And seeing as we're already threaded up in red, let's go ahead and do the next row of red now. So now the colours are reversed. So now we're going to float over these 3 reds and pick up a block of 3 by 3 reds over on the right. We will do 3 red stitches here. 2. And then we're going to float across and go to the next red stitch in this row, which is just over here. Oops, nearly lost that one. And let's just duplicate stitch this one. And let's actually go across to the next row up, but let's go a little bit further out. Let's pick up that stitch there. And then we'll leave that there while we build up the white in that row. By now you should have a sense of what I'm doing here, so I will just carry on filming the repair and I will just bring in some commentary where I feel it's relevant, but you should be able to now follow exactly what I'm doing based on what I've explained up to now. So now we are at this row where the colors swap again, but just for one row. So above this block of 3x3 reds, we need to have one row of white, and it just alternates like that. So we're just going to go ahead and finish this row, and then we can build up this last block up here. Now I can connect this row to this row because we have 3 stitches there intact as far as I can see. Pick up this one here. So actually these 3 white stitches, I could have just picked up those red stitches above instead of using these pins, but a bit late now. Still have an area to build up here on the white section. Now I'm going to go to the row above. Let's build up the white stitches on the next row above now. So now we can pick up these live loops here. And that will give us our 3 stitches here in this block. Now we've completed all the reds, so we can, and I don't think we need to reinforce anything up here, so let's just go ahead and tail off our red. Let's just do one last duplicate stitch here. And again, we can just wind that yarn up here, bring it back down. Just give it a bit of a tail. And then we can cut that. And then let's just finish off reinforcing the white row up here. And let's just wind off here. And that's it. We are done with this invisible repair on this first haul. When it comes to the straggly yarns at the back, I tend to just trim them away. Because we've reinforced the area quite well, I'm not worried that any of these yarns are going to start unraveling. So I'm just going to trim them down. So that's what it looks like from the back, and that's what it looks like from the front. And there you have it. This repair is finally done. It has taken me a day and a half solid work to repair 14 holes across this whole cardigan. Here is the hole that we did together, and I did all of the other ones in a very similar fashion. We had one big one here, one big one here. We had a big hole here on the sleeve as well. I also did a repair on the cuff, which I didn't film because I find cuffs a little bit tricky, like when you have to redo the whole bottom of a cuff, because there's so many different ways to cast on, to bind off. So I tend to just do it as best as I can, trying to replicate what it looks like as much as possible. I hope you enjoyed coming with me on this repair. If you are interested in learning all of the basic techniques that I have used in doing these invisible repairs, you can download all of the step-by-step tutorials on my Buy Me a Coffee page, and I've added the link in the video description. I hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.